Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Tech Leaders Unplugged. My name is Wade Erickson. I'll be the host, and our guest that we're getting unplugged with today is David Hood, CEO and founder of 42 Robots AI. Thanks, David, for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me, Wade.
Yeah, our topic today is the practical AI solution architecture. Why don't we kick it off, David? Introduce yourself a little bit about your company, and then we'll jump into the topic after that.
Yeah, I can go right into the topic afterwards. So I'm the CEO of 42 Robots AI. I have 30 plus years coding in 30 plus languages. I remember the first time I coded on a TI-89 Yahtzee instead of paying attention in math class. I'm a lot more of a back-end coder than a front-end coder. Don't really like the front-end coding. I do have a degree in mechanical engineering and industrial engineering and a lot of experience processing large data sets with code, which is aligned with what our product is, which is basically like a personal medical researcher AI agent that we're building. And we're close to having a demo of that. And if you want, I can jump right into the architecture.
Yeah. So, the practical AI solution architecture, I think a lot of folks are, trying to just wrap their head around this. We have a lot of companies. I know I talked to a lot of leadership, and, with the hype that we've really seen over the last year, with ChatGPT exploding, of course, AI has been around a long time, and there's so many different flavors of AI. I know we've talked about, when companies want to try to get AI involved in their products or services, oftentimes it's a search for what's the best type of AI really and machine learning to add. And so having this architectural conversation, I think that's foundational in getting an appreciation for what AI can do in many, many different scenarios and applying it where maybe the best value return on investment, because it all costs money, and there's a lot going into it. So how to spend wisely versus just chasing the idea of AI. So let's just jump into that, and tell me a little bit about the topic. How did that form, in your mind?
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about.
Yeah, actually, it was a long time in the working, because I've identified this for over a year, and I just thought everybody else saw this, and then earlier on this year, even talking within my company about how to build AI-powered solutions, I realized that this is not how almost anybody is thinking about it. In fact, I think everybody's thinking about it in a way that is extremely limiting. And you can see that in the way they talk about it. First of all, let me state that it's specifically LLM focused, so large language model focused. This is where, there have been a lot of visual AI models from the past that are, they can look at stuff and identify stuff. This is specifically the large language models that, like the ChatGPT, the new capabilities that enabled that. And this creates a whole bunch of problems. So if you think about it, it makes sense that there's a lot of challenges with this, because prior to this, basically all coding was completely deterministic, non-random. And now we're injecting randomness in there, and that changes a lot. I'll start by saying the way that is wrong, the wrong way to think about it, that most people are thinking about it. And you can, when I tell you this and you listen to other, even like big companies, the big leaders in this industry, you'll start to hear them talk about it like this, where the model is the solution and the solution is the model. This is a very limiting belief. They basically put the AI at the large language model at the center, and then there's a little bit of window dressing around it. Sometimes they call that the application layer, which to me implies that it's either thin or it's kind of just discrete and distributed from the AI itself. To me, this is backwards. Did you want to? And what I found, and has been obvious to me for over a year, based upon trying to build real world solutions and talking to a lot of different companies about their own solutions, you actually have to think about it the other way around. Think about it as in terms of, you have classic deterministic coding that uses AI or large language models at key places within the code to solve critical problems or to create new functionality that you couldn't do before. And it's not just one model. So in our solution, we use AI in over a dozen different places, and only like 2 of them are chat. And there's a bunch of other nuanced ways which we use AI, and you have to do a lot of pre-processing, and it's not just about the model. The models are there to solve the problems that you couldn't otherwise do. And there's a lot of there's a lot of new things that you can do with LLMs that couldn't be done before. But I think that there's a lot of actually, this is what kind of the realization I had. It's kind of like, why is this happening? Why don't people see this to me in a more practical way? Because when I've gone to some AI conferences and I talk to some of the people that are actually really building real world effective practical solutions, and they go, yeah, that's correct. Which is that most of the solutions are about 20 to 50% AI, and the rest is kind of classic deterministic coding. And that a lot of this classic deterministic coding is new code that actually AI cannot build because it's there to leverage AI. And so I think my theory behind why this is happening is, well, there's two parts of it. Number one, OpenAI and the big companies have an incentive to sell you on the LLMs that they produce, being more than they really are. But I think there's also a bit of a tech bro thing here going where, what do little boys love? They love, ninjas, dragons, and robots. And so you got a bunch of people saying, the robots are here, Elon Musk saying, AGI God next year, not because it's practical, but because they want it to be there. So I'll also expand a little bit on, especially for like a company, if you're looking to build an AI powered solution for your company. Number one, yes, these are magic boxes that do amazing things. But what you get when you try to think about the model as the solution is you try to shove as much of the solution into the magic box as you can. When in actuality, because they're unreliable, there's randomness in there, and they're slow and they're expensive, that you actually want to pull as much of the solution out of the model. And then additionally, when you're looking for opportunities, you don't really want to, it's so generally broad across so many useful across so many different business processes. You don't really have to find the perfect solution where you fully automate something. In fact, if you look at the way Tesla measures their automation from, I think it's level 0 to level 5, you want to do something more like level 2 to level 3 for most solutions, because you can get 90+% of the benefit for that level 2, level 3. Getting that to like 99 or 100% often takes orders of magnitude more work to get there, if it can even be done, especially with some of the limitations of LLMs. And I don't know, maybe part of this is also my history with coding is very old school. I'm not really super, I don't really understand the prompt. The software stack as well, because back in my day when you just load up C++ and it was all in one thing. And I think that what the mindset for how to build solutions is sort of like a very no code approximation type of framework that people are looking at. And that's why to me, it's an oversimplified, where they're just trying to like put the AI in its box and they're trying to put the rest of the code in its box. And then that's it. You get the input, you give it the input you want, you put it in the magic box, and you get the output you want. Or you do that in a few different steps. That's still, to me, a very limiting kind of structure for that. And even when I was looking at, we built some AI agents. The more I hear people talk about AI agents, the more I'm just like, it's just software. It's just software that has a large language model chat in there, and then it can do a whole bunch of other things. This kind of framework that you get where, again, the model is at the center. I heard one guy who has a very popular, very big, kind of company and known in this space a lot, say that an AI agent is basically an LLM on a loop. And to me, I was like, oh God, that's such an awful architecture. You're going to be very limited if that's how you think about it. And very few companies talk about this. There's only one company that I've really seen kind of talk about this a little bit, and they're called Palantir. And so I think that's one of the few companies that is actually looking at this from a practical mindset and saying, I can't remember what they called it. Like there's going to need to be some support structure of code to help the AI become effective. And so a couple of things that help understand this a little bit deeper. I highly recommend Jan LeCun. He's the head of Meta AI. He has some good YouTube videos out there talking about why LLMs can't beat AGI by itself. And this to me is super obvious. So just so you know that the robots aren't coming for everybody anytime soon. So it's not going to happen. And especially just as an LLM, you could have GPT-27. If that's just an LLM, there's not enough there. He has some arguments that are computer science as to why it wouldn't work, and philosophical. My argument, and this goes back to my industrial engineering days, is systems argument. I don't think there's enough pieces to the puzzle to make it like a sentient being. And so that's part of the issue. And then when you look at how LLMs really work, it kind of starts to add up to why some of the things are happening. It's weird because for a long time, people were like, we don't know why hallucination happens. And to me, it's been obvious because it's randomness. It picks the next chunk of words. And if it picks like a low probability one, then it can just kind of go off in a la-la land. That's why it hallucinates. Or it just doesn't have something in the training data on that particular thing. But it can be a combination of those two. But, you just think about it. It's really just, all it's doing is predicting the next token. It can't predict, when it gets here, it can't go, oh, that was bad, and circle back around, unless you put it into a bigger system, which case you could do that. You can have AI, take an AI output and have another AI evaluate it. A lot of times it's more complicated than that in our solutions, which is like, yeah, you take that part, maybe you parse this out, you process this, you add some more information here, and then you do something. There's a lot of that, and there's a lot of nuance in that structure. But effectively, one of the major things that doesn't really get talked about, that's a critical part of the large language models, and actually potentially just as important, if not more important, is that what it's done is they figured out how to turn blocks of text into math to where they can compare. So they can compare two different chunks of text and see how closely relevant they are. This is part of how the LLM works. When you put in your chunk of text, it's looking in its training data set for the relevant. It's not exactly true, but it's kind of looking for the relevant parts of its training data set to go find things. This is also where you get vector databases, which that's a huge development. These are incredibly useful. These are where it's a new type of database where essentially you can put a bunch of text into it, and then you get an incoming text from here, and you can pop off, even if there's 100,000 records in there, you can pop off the top 5 most relevant semantically. It's not just that you're looking for yellow fruit. You can pull off banana when you type in yellow fruit, it'll pull that off. Or if you type in banana, it could pull off other relevant, maybe closely relative fruits. And so that's a key part of it. Fine tuning is very valuable. Some people say that you can replace it with what's called retrieval augmented generation, which I alluded to a little bit. You need a vector database, and you essentially, when a user input comes in, you pop off the most relevant chunks from the database and you put it in the context window, into the window to give to the AI model its relevance. Fine tuning, sometimes it's a different thing. And just so you know that, but it's really useful. And this is where I definitely, for a lot of companies, most companies I don't think need to train a model from scratch. It's very expensive. It's very challenging. And a lot of times with a very small amount of data, fine tuning data, like we're talking sometimes between 100 and 1,000 good quality sample in inputs and outputs, you can get an incredibly powerful result from that. So I really like fine tuning, especially when prompt engineering doesn't do it. And when you're on a budget, you can do fine tuning for a tiny fraction of the cost, less than 1%, and get basically the same kind of output that you would get if you built something from scratch. And then with Llama 3 and Facebook Meta's models, their open source models, this becomes even easier. And this is actually one of the huge factors in this whole thing. I would be concerned if I were an investor in OpenAI, because if we kind of look ahead a little bit with like Llama 4, I think what will happen is for 95+% of use cases, Llama 4 will do the job for you. And so when you think about it, that puts these big model companies that have invested billions of dollars, to me, in a lot of trouble, because they're just not needed for most use cases. And on top of that, the implication of that is that the valuable skill set, to me, the most valuable skill set in the world, isn't even training these AI models. It's actually knowing how to use them. So basically AI engineering. How do you take the AI and put it in a practical solution? It's not just about training the model. It's not just about fine tuning the model. It's about the whole the system as a whole, and how do all the pieces fit together. And that a lot of people, they're so focused on the chat that they don't realize that there's so many other new capabilities that come about. What's central to our product is that I think that what's been clear to me is that there's new orders of magnitude, like 1,000x, 10,000x, millionx, more capability to analyze data, large data. And then the semantic relevance is really huge with the vector databases, being able to summarize text. You couldn't do this before. This is actually really useful in a variety of ways. You can expand. You can go the other way and expand text. You can extract data. You can kind of use it to triage. Do we go here? Do we go here? Or do we go here? And then categorization. All this, and there's so much focus on the chat that a lot of this is getting ignored. I think that explains most of it. I'm ready to see the questions.
Yeah. So it's interesting you bring up the vector databases in the semantic space. Back in probably around 1998, I was dealing with, this was back in the heyday of the resume databases, and so the challenge is a lot of people were having to read them, and this was the early days where they were largely keyword searching. And I worked with a friend that's from Dallas as well. You probably know him. He's one of the big AI gurus in town here. And we were working together to build and Google didn't even have this search capability. It was a semantic vector based. It was called semantic reasoning back then. And it was, you type in the word Java, and that is a very different term for a barista than it is for a programmer. And so, and it was all about the vector spacing and those kind of things. And so those were early days. And then we applied some of those kind of technologies to build much smarter. So basically what you could do is you could put the job description in, and then you could look against resume data banks of resumes, and it would look for those vector relationships and then find resumes that fit with a higher probability of match against the job description. And so, and that was, like I said, 1998.
Wow.
So it was a long time ago. And of course, people think this is all new stuff. That's almost 30 years ago, right? 25 at least, right? So, and it's exciting because, like you said, these things have only got better in those 25 years, And
yeah, and
it has been around a long time, and I think the excitement is great. It adds more dollars to the space. I think it's always been a great opportunity. 5 years ago, if you would have put the kind of budgets that are being thrown at it now in front of a CEO, they would have doubted it, because they would have thought about some of the other things that come to mind with AI 5 years ago versus today. So, as we talked about, programming and, linear path kind of result sets that we're used to with traditional programming. As a testing company, that's where the challenge is how do you test these AI products in an automated manner? And I think a lot of it is going to be apply AI against AI. I think that's going to be somewhat of a result set, but as you think about your product in the AI space, how do you think about testing? Is it closer to game testing, which is still very, very, very manual, or are you feeling like there is some approaches that might help with automated testing of AI products?
I think that there is a potential to build like a testing checker to some degree, but I think that it's going to be a lot manual. At least that's the way I see it right now. And the good news is that you don't necessarily need to look through 1,000 examples necessarily for a prompt to get to tune the right prompt. You can usually tell pretty quickly with maybe the same input 10 times. So this is something I've been pushing really hard with my team because I don't think they saw this. There's a ton of work because you envision we're not just using AI at one place. We're using it at many places. And so a lot of those need to be tuned, and there's unlimited combinations. And so this is a little bit of an art, and I've spent a lot of time practicing. This is prompt engineering is part of AI engineering, but it's less prompt engineering like what you put in a chat GPT and more about when you fit it in within a software, it needs to change. You need to have a consistent output. That's really important. And so like getting it to be structured the right way, that's kind of part of what you're trying to do, but also getting it to find the things that you want or to give the types of answers that you want. This requires tons of testing. And to me, I think that at least at first, you're going to need a lot of manual testing. You're going to need a lot of samples of the user, the manual person, seeing what the input is, seeing what the output is, and then the input and the output are actually the input to the checker, and the output is the feedback and the thoughts and the final response and the correct output from the user. I think you could potentially build something for a narrow use case, but the problem is that once you do that, once you've built that for that, you already have the right prompt, and now you need to move on to a different prompt. So especially when it comes to chat, how many different types of prompts can come in? Ooh, unlimited, basically. How many different variations are there? Now you can narrow that down. So for example, ours is medical. At the very beginning, what it does, it triages. There's a triage check that says, is this a medical question, a customer support question, or something else? And then there's a bunch of other kind of pre-checks like that for specific types of responses. So if you can kind of filter, okay, it's a medical question. Okay, well, that kind of narrows the band of different possibilities, but still, like, how many different questions can somebody ask on the medical space? It's almost unlimited. And so I do think that in general, yeah, it's going to you can't just like throw a tool at this if you want to do this right. Especially you think about, this is what I think Palantir mentioned, but that I think they should even go further on. There's a lot of new code that needs to be built. There's a lot of new code, and there's a lot of testing of the prompts that needs to be built. You're building, presumably, if you're building something with AI, you're building something that hasn't been done before. So it makes sense that there's not going to be really good testing. Yeah, some of those pre-checks can be handled by an LLM, Jacob.
Yeah, that was a question that came in. Yeah. So So that's where I kind of the AIs, testing AIs, and you're leveraging things in a smart manner. So we talked a little bit about people that want to develop products that include AI, and oftentimes it takes a lot of discovery, a lot of questions about, is this not only the right thing to do, because sometimes the best answer is not to do it, do something else, right? So tell me a little bit about, as you're developing your product, that I understand there's going to be a demo soon available. Mm-hmm. How does the role of CX UX kind of user research in your product development process? How do you find those volunteers that are kind of the voice of the customer that actually can provide pretty relevant information so that you can build a product that would be used for other people that how do you go after the market?
Yeah, I'll answer this from a high level. One of my co-founders is actually the UI UX expert. But what we've done is we have done user research. We've kind of surveyed people in detail. We do have a doctor and one of our investors who's helping us review the outputs and tell us what she would want to do for specific people. A lot of our solution actually is happen on the back end with how we process the data. We have multiple buckets of long-term memory, and each bucket has different layers, and so there's a lot of how do you play with the data that's really critical here. But then there's a lot of research that and development that needs to be done on like how to enable people to make it as easy as possible and as convenient as possible for them to get into the software, to use it in the way they need to do it. How do we get the data from them? Because we're very data hungry. The more data we can get, the more for a person to personalize, giving them a personalized response, the better. But yeah, we're going to have to, it's just going to be a long-term, consistent back and forth of trying some stuff, giving it to users and volunteers. So we do have volunteers, mostly from just people we know who are interested, but then we had a previous product. We just pivoted at the beginning of last month, and we told our, that we had customers, we said, hey, we're shutting this down because we think we can add a ton more value to society with this. And some people, here's a wait list. Here's what we're trying to do. We sold them on just kind of the base idea. And if you want to be a part of it, great. Here's the wait list. And we did have there were some really good positive responses. One person said like, oh my goodness, this is exactly what I was looking for. Please put me on this list. I have this condition. And so please add me. That was a really good sign. So we've gotten a few responses like that.
Great. All right. So kind of the last question I had, of course, the 42, Hitchhiker's Guide, the answer to the question of life is what most everybody, when they hear that 42 comes to mind.
Yeah.
There's a couple of other things. 42 was in, the diphenatine, I don't know if I pronounced that right, equation, which was, 42 was the one that was the last standout between 1 to 100 for that equation. And they finally solved it in 2019 with a ton of supercomputers and stuff. Where did the 42, did it come in from there, or did you have some other ideas about that helped shape that name of your company?
I'd say, let's say 70-80% came from thinking that AI is the answer to life, everything in the universe. That's and yes, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, we're fans of that. And actually, when we when we brought in 2 co-founders along with myself, when we did that late last year, actually, I realized after the fact that we're all 3 of us were 42 when we got started on that. But then there's some other mathematical properties of 42. There was this nerd movie with this genius who the answer to one of the questions was 42. And there's some other it's just kind of a fun number in a lot of ways. So it was a little bit tongue in cheek. But also there's a little bit of additional meaning there. I think that it's also part of, like, there's a certain threshold that I think we can meet, and we're the robots sort of. So I think if we kind of get to a certain point, we're going to be successful. And then right now with our product, it is kind of like, it's kind of like you have 42 people out there, 42 entities out there poring over your data every day, looking for new data for you every day. So there's kind of a mathematical threshold that we're implying in the number.
Great, cool. All right, so this is the part of the show I like to kind of pivot a little bit and talk about you as your personal kind of your background. And, looking at your profile, I think this is the second company you started. And, a lot of the folks that watch the show, they maybe have ideas of starting their own company. And, there's a lot of, I think I've had 4 or 5 companies I think I've done. Some mildly successful, none of them fantastically successful. I'm hoping the next one will. But sometimes the government comes in and changes the regulations on you and squashes the company that was supposed to be $1 million baby. Things like that come along. So buyer beware when you start your own company. It's not all in your hands. So tell me a little bit about the pivot. You've been working in tech for a long time. What gave you the courage to jump out on your first or your second one? What was that kind of that pivot and bifurcation in life's path to jump into this?
Yeah. So I did work. I had a good job at a big company before I started my previous business, but it just wasn't, I didn't fit very well into it. I didn't have a lot of autonomy. I don't like bureaucracy very much. And there's just a lot of nonsense you have to deal with. Yeah, you still have to deal with nonsense on your own, but at least you're kind of making your choice. And then also there was like scenarios where one year I think I did an amazing job and I got like a poor review because of some nonsense. And then one year I did a terrible job and I got a good review. And it was just sort of like completely my pay and my review seemed completely disconnected from my performance. And that was just like wacky. When you own your own business, if you don't perform, you don't make money. Yeah. And so, or your business fails or something. And so there's that part of it. I'm just also kind of an independent thinker. And sometimes you just gotta, what I did was I looked ahead and I thought to myself, I'm still working for this company and still complaining to myself and still saying that this is not making me happy. And it's 15 years later, whose fault is it but my own? Right. At some point, you got to take responsibility for your own life and just say, what can I do to do better? What can I do to and go for it? And even if it failed, I don't think I would have regretted it. In fact, it did kind of get to the point towards the end where I was not really happy being in there. And I was looking for other things. And then ChatGPT came out and a week into playing with it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is a new development. There's new capabilities here. And so I spent like 3 months just studying up on AI and LLMs and how they work and what they can do and brainstorming and planning. And then about 3 months in, I was like, all right, this is it. This is the moment I've been waiting for. This is right up my alley with my experience with understanding complex business systems, with processing large data sets with code. Right up my alley. Perfect moment for me. Perfect skill set. I've been practicing for this moment. To me, it feels like I've been practicing for this moment for 30 years. And so I started 42 Robots. And I just went out and we tried to build some stuff. So our first product that we had out was more like an aggregator for AI with some productivity tools. So you could use multiple different models, and you could use Claude and OpenAI's models. You could use Midjourney. There were some productivity and efficiency features. But what I looked at, I kind of looked ahead and I saw some kind of dead ends. And I just really what it came down to was there was two kind of experiences I had over a short period of time about March-ish, where I was talking to somebody and her son has a long-term condition. And she said, well, what if AI could help with that? And started thinking about it. And then a couple of days later, a family member of mine got a really bad diagnosis. And I started to think about it a lot more. And then what it came down to is I really, really thought deeply about it. I was like, when we're making it a little bit more productive for people to use AI versus like saving somebody's life. And I think that is just worlds of difference of value to humans. And so even though we had to take a couple steps back and like turn off customers who are paying for it, I think it's the right play for us. And I'm really excited to go in because there's just so many things in the medical space where like you have a doctor over here does this test and a doctor over does this test and they never get connected. And so many people are just spinning their wheels trying to talk to a doctor where a doctor, they only have 5 minutes they can talk to you and that's all they can give you. Or like a new study comes out tomorrow and you don't have some sort of process to find that. I have somebody was telling me that they actually were wealthy. They know a family who was wealthy and they actually hired a doctor or somebody to every day go out there and search for stuff for them and to process their personalized data that's just relevant to them. And that's kind of what I think we can do here. And I think we're uniquely qualified to do that. I think that based upon the fact that most people are looking at the architecture wrong. And so they're very limited on top of my personal experience with processing large data sets with code. And I think we have a really great advantage that we can use to help people. So I'm excited. I can't wait for the first person to go, you saved my life or you made my life better. I'm like super happy. I'm going to be doing a little dance when that happens.
That's great. So dissatisfaction in work life, purpose driven, that seems to be a pretty common trend as, why would you jump out the comfort zone of a job, even though you're not like maybe completely satisfied? You can get a lot of satisfaction outside of work. And my recommendation to any young person coming up is absolutely do not look for your purpose in your 9 to 5 unless you're a doctor or something already. But look for it outside of the job, and then maybe that could become your job. Because it's so hard to really get everything in line, happiness of your job, satisfaction, purpose, all of that, when really the job is to make money and pay the bills, right? Purpose can be found in many other places. So, all right, well, we're at the top of the hour here. I wanted to introduce, we actually have another show tomorrow. Normally we only do one show a week. Tomorrow's show is with Willetta Araman. She is the DevOps Automation GTM Product Skills Adoption and Growth. That's a long title, at IBM. Looking forward to that. And the topic is stumbled into testing as a developer. So we're going to talk a little bit about testing in the development process with Willetta of IBM. So look forward to having you there. It's a little bit different time. It's at 10 a.m. instead of 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. So thank you so much, David. Great topic. We've had quite a few shows with AI flavored in them. It's nice to kind of have some that step back and really kind of look at it a little holistically, be honest and transparent about exactly what you said. Hey, it's not the center of the universe. It's a component of your product. And so, think about the problems you're solving and then look at AI on how you can design that and use that. And then, like you said, don't shove stuff into it, peel stuff out, because it's the deterministic aspect. You're going to make a much more predictable product experience than if you're having all this randomness come out. And doesn't take long before people, think about when ChatGPT came out, the first couple of months that was making the news was the crazy hallucination stuff that came out of it, not the 95% that was, solving people's day to day every day. It was like, oh, look at this stupid response it came up with, remember? So, anyway, thanks again. And
thanks for having me.
Soon, and appreciate your time. Until tomorrow, everybody else, join us tomorrow live for a show tomorrow. Have a good day.